debut from '62, isn't it? Was it? 63 was it come on? Anybody know? Let me check.
When was that, sorry?
I would say early '63.
Yeah. Right, there we go. The Rolling Stones come on from 1963, their debut record. We're going to talk to Terry Rawlings, who is the author of Who Killed Christopher Robin, the Murder of Brian Jones. Along with Paul Spendle, they've looked at the fascinating insight into the death, or what you consider, Terry, the murder of Brian Jones, yeah?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well,
as far as you can say at this moment in time?
I would say murder, yeah. He's certainly dead.
Well, we've certainly, like, been a long time dead. Age of 27, I think. Was it 27 when he died?
Yeah, he started the 27 Club. First one to go.
Yeah. So let's go back to the beginnings of the Rolling Stones. It was his band. He named the band, and he was the man behind it. You've got this advert from one of the local papers, which is Brian's ad saying guitarist and vocalist forming R&B band require harmonica and/or tenor sax, piano, bass, drums. Must be keen to rehearse. Plenty of interesting work available. But that was the ad that sort of started the group. Is that right?
That's it. Yeah. He named the band and actually recruited members.
So, starting with his early beginnings and how integral he was to the Rolling Stones, what is your kind of appreciation of Brian as his contribution to the Rolling Stones?
I don't think there would be a Rolling Stones without Brian. He was the driving force behind it. There would be a band of some sort with Mick and Keith without that, but not Rolling Stones.
His contribution is often overlooked as well.
He was the guitar player. He was the focal point as well. You've only got to look at them album covers and EP covers. He's always at the front. He was the most popular guy, bar none. His fan letters outstripped all the other four members tenfold.
Yeah.
And,
he looked the part as well, though, didn't he?
He did, certainly. I mean, that's why you got photographers like Gerard Mankiewicz who sort of singled him out on them great covers. He's always at the front. You wouldn't. Anyone getting them records in America would not dream that he wasn't the leader.
Mellotron, keyboards, all little twiddly bits was always Brian's. All the sort of intricacies of,
Yeah,
and all the weirdness that he brought to the Rolling Stones was always Brian, wasn't it?
He made a lot of them songs, but he made up for his lack of songwriting by being a multi-instrumentalist. But also, a lot of people forget that he actually broke his wrist by beating up his girlfriend Anita, and he couldn't really play that well guitar anymore. And if you look at some of them album covers, I'd say his hands bandaged up.
From what year did he damage the hand?
67.
Right, okay.
When he was knocking her about. So he had to sort of come up with something else. His guitar playing was suffering because he punched his girlfriend and hit a iron window frame and fractured his hand. So that was why a lot of them strange sounds came about.
Yeah. As a character, then, was he likeable, Brian, or for the people you spoke to and met around him?
Well, it's funny because if you speak to the women that knew him back then, his girlfriends or associates, over the years they seem to have altered their opinion of him, whether he was horrible to them, whether he bashed them about, whether he left them with kids and disappeared, or they seem to look back over it with a different view of it. But if you ask the guys who hang around him, they haven't changed their opinions. Their first impressions was that he was a nasty piece of work, and he's remained so since then. So it's a real change. If it's the women you ask, he was lovely, he was a beautiful human being. If you ask the men, he was a right nasty piece of work.
Who out of the Stones have you spoken to or had messages from?
I only got one message via Keith who said that cat probably got it right, but that was about as far as we got.
And that was after he'd read the book, is that?
Yeah. So we use that line a lot.
So would I. so would I. So if we build the character of Jones, he was tormented, talented, a bit of a handful. Is that safe to say? All of those things.
Yeah, he was very. A lot of people in Rawlings are one.
And his habits, drug habit, drinking drugs, generally.
I think he really put the hours in for that.
Yeah, but he did serve his apprenticeship.
Whether it was ignorance in them days, no one really knew what, how bad it was doing their bodies in or not. But he certainly didn't hold back on that.
Do you know how he dealt with the early success? Because they had that great run of singles. They were going to America a lot. Did he handle it quite well, or was he just one of those people that was out of control as he travelled the world and partied and all the rest of it?
I think his partying got out of control. There's a famous story where in Chicago he just gets out of the car on a flyover and disappears for days, doesn't even turn up for shows. So that's in 1966, so he's already losing it.
Yeah. His sacking came when?
That was well, it was 60.
He was missing rehearsals, missing shows. He was doing all of that, wasn't he? He was falling apart.
When he turned up, he looked like a bit of a liability as well. But you still see him in 1+1, where he obviously contributes to Sympathy for the Devil. He starts out with that original riff, and he's there on film. Yeah. So he had flashes of brilliance still.
So I would imagine then there was a kind of friction between him and Jagger, certainly, because there was the ownership of the band. It was Brian's, and then it was kind of wrestled by Mick. Was that right? It was just I'm the front man, I lead the group, and Brian was kind of pushed to the back a little bit.
Well, he still is the same way, it seems to me. He still seems to don't like anyone to usurp him, does he? Mick?
No.
So, and especially you've got a guy who's obviously more popular than him.
Yeah.
And arguably better looking and better dressed.
So he began to unravel, probably from mid-60s onwards. Brian, he was getting out of control, and stereotypical rock and roll star.
Yeah.
Out of control,
yeah.
fast cars, girls.
He was the original pop star, wasn't he?
Yeah.
The one that, the first one to spiral out of control and the first one to die.
Yeah.
They all started, he started that trend.
If it's a trend dropping like flies.
Yeah.
So, what year was he sacked from the band?
69.
So 69. So this was a few months before the Hyde Park and we had the 6 weeks. So we've got. Hang on. So we're in July of what month are we in 69?
July.
July 69 was his death.
Yeah.
He'd been sacked
6 weeks.
6 weeks before that,
concert,
and then a few days after the death was the Hyde Park shows. Have I got that right? I'm just trying to
they turned it into a memorial. It was already booked. They didn't do it because of him.
Yeah.
It was already sorted out.
So he was sacked for what reason? What's the official verdict? Can you remember?
Well, he couldn't tour. He couldn't go to America anymore because they wouldn't
too
many drug busts.
Yeah. Well, they all had. Well, Jagger and Richard had were busted, weren't they?
Yeah, which made his death a bit weird because the guy that was initially arrested, Frank Farragut, who undoubtedly did kill him, was arrested with more drugs on him than the all three of the Stones had ever had possession of.
Yeah. So writing this book, what have you learned in the prior to the death? Because you already said it's murder, which I think is quite a bold statement. Because I think you're probably one of the first people to come out and say, according to the information and the people I've spoken to, it's definitely murder.
Well, we got some of the original local police reports, and they wanted to charge the guy for murder. It was only because the London police took over the investigation that was all swept under.
Well, let's go back to say the week prior to the so-called party at the house. What do you know of the lead up to what happened on that night? Maybe a week or two before. Well, what is the build up to the
we know
that
that he's had enough of these builders, these hangers on that were living in his house.
So he's out in the countryside.
Yeah, he lived in the house at Pooh Corner, the AA Mill, the Road near the Poohs.
So with his money, he did the rock and roll thing, a big house in the country pile.
He was fast running out of money. And one of the things which we couldn't quite work out is when they come down to sack him, they want him to sign. Mick and Keith and Charlie come down to sack him. There's a big argument and there's a big punch-up. And I wondered whether it was he still owned the name, because you look at Axl Rose, he still has Guns N' Roses. The other four haven't got a clue. So was that what the argument's about?
It's difficult to say.
Yeah.
You tell me. I don't really know what to start because it's very, very complicated. The book is very, very detailed.
Yeah.
Let's go through some of the characters. A lot of it hinges around Tom Keelock, who was the road manager, Mr. Fix-It for the band.
Tom Keelock.
Tell me about him.
Well, a lot of the bands in them days in the 60s were connected to, if you like, the underworld, because the underworld infiltrated lots of them bands, the Gunnels and, the Richardsons managed the English Birds, and the Stones sort of flirted with that gangster image, the Crays were like stars, Bailey was taking photographs as, Mick and Keith, as well as,
I think the Stones were seen as bad boys anyway, weren't they? The bad boy image.
So they surrounded themselves with that sort of London underworld connection. They liked that image. It eventually ended up in the film performance. He was still. But what they didn't realise, these people were slowly but surely taking over the running of the band. They were actually the hirers and firers.
Muscling in, were they?
Yeah, the chauffeurs. And Tom was like the head of it. It was like a triangle. He was the top of the triangle. And it just had levels of villainous characters from the chauffeurs to minders. And Tom was the hire and fire of all these people. He knew everyone in North London and South London. So he was very pivotal Bill Wyman says in his book, in them days, and Frank had gone to the office to get money the day before Wednesday to find out that Brian had sacked him behind his back rather than confront him. So he has to come back to Cutsford, where he's been living very nicely, and charging obscene amounts of money. I think the amount of work in 9 months adds up in today's money as 120, 140 grand.
Right. So he was bleeding Brian dry.
Yeah, so he finally stopped the money. He went up to the office the day before Frank did, stopped them, sacked them all that way, and then waited for the fallout. So he's come back. He's got a lot of angry workmen there who ain't going to get paid anymore. Their gravy train's over. They have a party, they have a drink. They go to a pub first to work out what they're going to do. And then they come back, they've had a few drinks, just got out of hand. And that's what the statements were
So
since.
it immediately becomes a cover-up thing. It's covered up almost immediately, isn't it?
Yeah, within 3 hours.
Yeah, which is this mysterious 3 hours that...
And when the ambulance turns up, they take Frank away because he's injured his hand. They leave the body laying by the side of the pub till 6 in the morning.
Right.
So when Tom goes to get Frank from the police station, bring him back, the ambulance is just pulling out.
Right, and so there's no sort of doctors or police or paramedics or whatever you would call that didn't arrive in the house.
They came and they told to take Frank away.
So why would they leave the body lying by the pool? You know, deteriorating with the night air or whatever, destroying its own evidence.
The local policeman sat with it all night, PC Evans. He sat there all night with it until the ambulance came back.
That's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah.
And what was his... this is the local policeman who filed the report that he'd probably been drowned by the people in the pool.
Yeah.
Was it death by misadventure in the end?
Yeah.
Right. So what happened...
But you think about it, there was no crime reported. Therefore, there's no one ever to be arrested. No one said he was murdered because everyone's going, forget it, there's nothing to be here.
So it was death by misadventure?
Yeah.
What did the autopsies... Because you've got autopsy reports at the back there, haven't you?
They say that as well.
Yeah, do they? And he was full of drink and drugs as well?
Not totally, no. Definitely not enough to kill him. No. Not at all.
So your book is more about piecing together what happened that night and... just tell us about some of the characters involved. There's the infamous nurse, Janet Lawson.
Janet Lawson. She was down there because she came to break the news to Tom Keeler. She was pregnant by him. That's the reason Tom was there.
Okay, right.
This has never come out before.
This heightens everything, doesn't it? So.
Yeah. And he's got a daughter now, and I think she lives in Scotland.
Right.
I don't know if the rest of the family knew about that.
Right. So, what part did she play in that night? She was part of the...
She was there with Tom.
Right.
So she knows what happened as well. And she disappeared after that.
And did she
went to live on an Air Force base.
Right. Did you ever say anything about that night to this point now? Did she come out and said anything?
She spoke to the Daily Mail, I think it was, about what was going on, but she's very vague about it. She just said she was there that night. She doesn't say why she was there. She was breaking the news to Tom of his impending fatherhood.
Right.
The one I can never work out is the supposed girlfriend, Anna Rowling. It doesn't seem that anyone saw her.
Brian's girlfriend on the night. What was her name?
Anna Rowling.
Right, and nobody saw her, or
no? She came after I originally put this book out before we had all the reports to back it up. She came out with a book and said, yes, he was murdered. I was there. He was murdered. But none of the workmen who worked at the house ever remember seeing her. So she's a very shady character. She obviously was there at some point because in the morning there's photographs of her, getting into a car.
So she probably stayed out of the way.
Yeah.
Or with somebody else in the
along with Jackie. There's photographs of the 3 girls getting in the car in the morning.
Taxi driver Joan Fitzsimmons as well is implicated. She was there. Did she say she was another one? Are we just talking about? I wasn't there. She was there. This is what we're talking about.
Jackie Shaw was definitely there. Joan Fitzsimmons left at 9:30, and that's when Tom gives away the fact he's there. Because when they was looking into her attempted murder, Tom was questioned. She went, "Oh yes, she left at 9:30," which gives away the fact that he was there.
Mm-hmm. But discovering this story, and what is at the core of it? What made you want to write and sit down and investigate and spend so much time on this case? What is it? The one thing? Were you just trying to solve the thing, or what were you after? What
after I'd done the second follow-up, I could only allude to what I thought had happened until Paul Swindle managed to get all the files
from the Home Office.
Yeah, and from various places like that. And I thought, well, I can't just let someone else finish it now. I've done 2 versions of this, 2 files. And now I can actually show where I was alluding to what happened. I can now back it up with fact. Right. So I thought, well, I'll finish it there.
You were saying that some of these Home Office reports still have
80 pages they ripped out for some reason, and they've stored them away for another 50 years. I mean,
So-
if there's nothing to hide, why do that?
Well, indeed, there must be some reason
Yeah.
that somebody's been, forced to go in there and tear out pieces of important information. In your investigation, what has surprised you? Because it is, it is an investigation, isn't it? You've conducted it of sorts.
Surprised me that no crime was reported. This guy just happened to drop dead in a pool. It just doesn't seem like it's possible, does it? And
Well-
no one saw it happen.
Well, I mean, I don't know whether police evidence or how they gathered it in those days. Was it complicated to prove how he died, or?
No, because when it started, a lot of people were still alive. I worked at Decca Records as a postboy in the late 70s, and a lot of people who was working at Decca then had been there right through the 60s, and it was as close to the time I was there at 78, 79, which is not that far away from 68, 69. They all had a story to tell, and they all had this theory that he was definitely done in. It was all clear, and that's what started me off. And plus, you'd go to Decca House. It was this great big old Victorian establishment with its own bank and a boardroom and all that. And there's big pictures of Brian Jones on all the walls, and you think, well, something's selling. We need to do something.
Yeah. You kind of pointed in that direction.
Yeah.
So, how long has it, from start to finish, taken you to gather together this whole project? Does it take how many years of your life has it taken?
Oh, on and off, I suppose, a good 5 or 6. Solid working on it.
All right. And is it concluded?
I think so. I don't think. Well, without them 80 pages, you're still going to be 80
Yeah,
pages.
well,
You're
indeed.
still going to be 80 pages
What
short.
do you reckon the information is held on those 80 pages? It must be something
I think it's stuff from the Home Office saying this is not going to go any further. Just drop it. That's nothing else to report. There you go. It's one of them we found where it's the public opinion will not like any money being spent on this case. So brush it under the carpet, basically.
Because I suppose at the time that the Stones were seen as a scourge, weren't they? I think 3 of them at one stage in '67 were up on drugs charges, weren't they? So
Yeah,
they sort of anti-establishment, anti-government. So is there a reason for the government to sort of suppress this case, or just death by misadventure? Is there any point in what would the point of the government be in playing their role in the death of Brian Jones?
I thought they just thought the establishment wouldn't be behind them investigating anything to do. He was just a drug addict, let him go, sort of thing. Also, the autopsy was performed the very next day, rather than what is commonly known as you'd leave a body to see if any bruises start to come out. But it was done within hours of it getting to the...
Is that normal procedure? I don't really.
Yeah,
I don't know.
they don't carry out an autopsy within hours of his death.
Yeah.
They want to see, especially if it's under weird circumstances. They're going to see if there's any bruising or, they better know. And the coroner bizarrely got I think £75,000 worth of Dunlop shares put into his bank the very next day.
Really?
Where'd that come from?
I'm sure you have your ideas on that.
Yeah.
If you look through that whole case and its intricacies and everything, who would gain from the death of
Well, if Brian Jones owned the name, obviously Mick and Keith would gain.
Now, you're not implementing them in the murder, though, are you?
No. But I'm sure that they wanted him out of the way, and they was supposed to be paying him off £100 grand, which never arrived. What was that £100 grand for? So I think they were trying to buy the name. He named them, and he had a lot of good advice from people like Alexis Cornuck when he formed the Stones, who would have given him that advice to register that name.
Yeah.
Because he was no fool.
There's not one person that really would want him dead, is there? Throughout this
No,
this
other than the builders who just resented him. They was from a different generation. They'd been, subscripted into the army. They'd probably done their time. He was some 27-year-old, pampered pop star telling them what to do. Best women in the world, best drink, best drugs, and they lived in council houses in North London.
So, I mean, if you look at the evidence, it seems to me that the builders are the people that have the grudge, because he was their cash cow, and they could rip him off. And did you say that there was very little building work carried out? I mean, what did you say?
I got to know Mr. Johns, who bought the house from Brian Jones' estate in '69 after he died, and I spoke to him first in the early '80s. And I said, "What was the house like when you first got here?" He said it was a dump. He said nothing had been done, nothing worked, and they'd been there 9 months, claiming, in today's money, 140 grand.
Right.
He said the irrigation was never done in the field, the kitchen was all falling down. So what was they doing? They was just there.
So, and what I'm trying to get at as well is that the fact that to do Brian damage would still the cash would stop, wouldn't it? Unless they're trying to get at some assets.
Yeah, well, they found that they'd been sacked that the day before, so they knew it was all over.
Right.
But up until then, 9 months of partying, living in the house,
Yeah.
You know,
It's all coming
it's
to
all
an end.
married men, and they all had these women down there. It's, you know.
Well, living there. So okay. So they're living the dream.
Yeah.
They have a reason to not murder Brian, but shake him up a little bit.
Yeah.
To force him back into starting building work again. Wanted the party continued. Is that?
Yeah. They stayed there afterwards. They were still living there.
Were they?
Yeah.
So they're amongst the evidence. Which you mean?
Yeah. Well, they cleared the house out completely. There was nothing left. When Mr. Jones's mum and dad went down there was nothing to take. He had no possessions. They'd already stripped it away.
And I suppose it's a very difficult case because he died in water. He was left. What do you say? How many hours overnight in the summer?
Well, if he died at 9:30, he was still there at 6 when the ambulance came back for him.
Which is incredible, isn't it? You know,
It's a long
these are big holes in
Yeah.
the
Why
investigation.
take away the builder and get his hand fixed up, then take him to a local police station, question for a couple of hours, come back, find more drugs in his pocket than all three Rolling Stones had ever been arrested for between the three of them, and he's just let off. They take away the drugs, the black bombers, which he'd obviously made. He'd also made hash cakes as well with cannabis, and they just go, right, you'll be hearing from us. He went, fair enough. And he said, are these drugs yours? He went, yeah. He said, I was holding them for Brian. He said, but are you in possession of them? Yes, I am. All right, we'll get back to you. Nothing.
Yeah, it's extraordinary, isn't it?
Yeah.
So there are a lot of anomalies in this case.
Do you think Brian Jones got arrested for a bit of hashing up all the wall?
Yeah.
And was imprisoned for it?
Well, I think by and large the Stones were stitched up a great deal, weren't they?
Yeah, I think a lot of them was. Yeah.
They just made examples.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But, being in possession of drugs is still being in possession of drugs.
well, he did. Well,
If
no matter
Rolling Stone or not.
well, it definitely, no matter which way you look at it.
Yeah.
As you sit there looking back and having sat there and examined the evidence, who do you think out of all the people you spoke to is the guiltiest of them all? Who is the person that, or is it is it a gang thing? Is it?
It's a gang thing. They all stuck to them stories.
They've all sort of like this.
Yeah.
They've sat down and got this corroborated the
3
story.
3 hours of a very
They've rehearsed it, yeah.
drummed into their heads what you're going to say.
Which is a typical criminal thing. So
Yeah.
we need to get our stories right for when the police arrive.
Yeah, and the police happened to be my brother.
Yeah, yeah,
You know?
yeah. It's extraordinary.
Mm.
Do you recall throughout your investigation what happened after that murder? Was it did it all die off? Was it just
Instantly.
death by instantly? Did it? I mean, and this is in '69, so
Yeah.
we're talking about probably the winter of '69. It was almost the story was dead and buried. Is that right?
Yeah, by the next day.
And then what happened then? Who started to think there's something wrong? Who were was it the press? Was it an investigative journalist? What happened?
First I remember hearing of it, that something was murdered, was we used to have a caravan, our family, down in Selsey Bill, which is on the south coast, which is close to West Wittering. And my dad used to talk to these coppers, they had a caravan there. And that was the first I remember hearing of it. My mum and dad talking to these coppers about him being murdered. And then, my mum took me to West Wittering, to Keith Richards' house, when I was 5 or 6. And there's a photograph of me and Tom Keylock coming down the garden path.
Is that through your exhaustive work and investigation? What one point, one particular piece of information you received that sort of really summed it up for you? The whole thing.
Finally, Tom admitting he was there.
Was that the key to the whole thing for you?
Yeah, well, I always knew he was in touch with Janet, because I caught him making a phone call once during the early days.
So remind me, just remind me that
Janet was the nurse.
Nurse and Tom. Yes, it's Tom and Janet.
Yeah.
Right. And
But Tom was already married to Joan, his wife.
right.
Frank was married, and he was going with
All this detail I'm trying to
So
remember.
he was going with one of the cab drivers.
Right.
Tom was. They went out as a foursome down there. They was very blatant about showing off.
Right.
So the fact that Tom finally come clean.
After all of how long?
Since 1980.
Right. So he's kept that,
Yeah.
You know.
And he died
Yeah.
on the exact same day as Brian Jones.
Really?
Yeah.
That's even more.
And so did the cab driver.
Right. Okay. Now
So
there's off.
3 people died on exactly the same day.
No, that's absolutely bonkers. I think as much as we can talk about this, you really have to sit down and read the book.
Yeah.
The book is called "Who Killed Christopher Robin?"
Final truth. Yeah.
The Final Truth: The Murder of Brian Jones by Terry Rawlings, along with Paul Spendle. Is that right?
Yeah.
And it's now out. And the book Stoned, is that?
That was a film we made on the second version.
Okay.
With Stephen Woolley.
Is it more to come from this book and another film? Is there more to come? Do you think?
I think I've exhausted it now. People be going, oh, not another one.
You want to put it behind you.
Yeah, I think it's good enough. I mean, we're going to do a documentary on all the footage we've shot
Right.
of all the main players. We took them all back to Gotchwood Farm and filmed.
So there's still a little bit more in it for you. And that will be it.
That would be, yeah. Because we've got all these tapes, so I might as well put it out. You know, there's a lot of interest. There's a lot of Brian Jones fans still out there.
Yeah. And do we expect to see that soon?
Yes, I'm going sort of on the way of sorting out all the footage now. So yeah, pretty soon.
Okay, and you get to go back to the house and retrace the
No,
footsteps?
Mr. Johns has left now, so I don't know who's took it over now. But we've got enough footage of us at the house.
Okay.
You know, walking around.
Well, it is a fascinating insight into, well, you know, essentially a tragic life, would we say, about Brian or not?
I think he seems to enjoy it.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. As much as he possibly could, yeah.
Yeah.
There's more, obviously, to this, and there's a lot more detail. You can investigate for yourself by reading Who Killed Christopher Robin, The Murder of Brian Jones by Terry Rawlings, and Paul Spendle is out now. It's been a pleasure. Terry, thank you.
Thanks a lot.